Hey, everybody, welcome. We're going to give it a couple of minutes. We had um, close on 200 people sign up, and so I see people are pouring in 40 or so far. So let's give it a couple of minutes for for folks to arrive, and then we'll get started. Just give it a couple more minutes as people seem to be still pouring in. Just one more minute, and then we'll get started. All right, welcome everybody. I see Chuck Elkins has already got a question in the chat, so we're off to a productive start. So I really want to thank everyone for coming out. This is obviously a really important issue for folks in the ward and throughout the city. It's scary when bus routes get reconfigured. It's also an opportunity when bus routes get reconfigured. I want to express a lot of gratitude to WMATA for engaging in the way that you are on this process, receiving all of the different comments, including comments from us in the last round, and again, coming again in the next round, and engaging in meetings like this one in the community. We chose to do this on a very hot time of year to virtually, and I hope that could prove to be an efficient way to get comments to you about some of the issues that are concerns to folks in the ward. I see this meeting as serving two purposes. One purpose is we will be listening closely in our office to what all the comments are, and we want to support those comments. And in the comments that we submit to WMATA in advance of July 15th. So we will be continuing our learning process in this meeting tonight. But also very, very importantly, this is an opportunity to interact directly with the WMATA officials who are working on this project, who the pen is in their hands, and we want to have some impact on the way that they're thinking about these issues and pass on good ideas for how things can be made better. I'm going to turn it over in a minute to the WMATA team to do an opening presentation. Then we're going to turn to a question and answer period. We're going to try to organize that question and answer period around some of the big picture topics that we've heard about. We'll start off, frankly, with the N2, N4, N6, and probably call on a couple of people who have raised questions and indicated a desire to talk about that set of issues. But we'll move through all of the issues, and we want to make sure that we use this 2-hour period to be sure that folks are heard about all of the issues that are on the table. Probably do a little bit of curating if we get into our 6th comment on the same issue and we feel like that turf's been covered. Probably going to try to move over to another topic to make sure that other folks can be heard and that we cover everything. But this is hopefully an opportunity to interact directly with the WMATA folks, get comments on the table, and get answers to different questions. With that, I'm going to introduce, you'll see on my screen, Hannah is in the upper left-hand corner. She's identified as Kevin. That's not accurate, but Hannah Fuladi, who is the point person in our office. Hannah, if you would in the chat put your email so that people can, if they have not already been in communication with you, they can be in communication with you about these issues. Kevin Cowdill we don't have a Hollywood Squares. We're one column short of a Hollywood Squares. Kevin does communications for our office, and obviously we'll be working on these issues as well. We have a bunch of people from WMATA, and I really think that's a testament to the seriousness with which they're taking this engagement process. Allison Davis is the Senior Vice President for Planning and Sustainability. Thank you, Allison, for being here. Al Himes is the Director of Bus Service and Planning. Thank you, Al. Peter Caffiero is the Vice President for Service and Planning. And then we also have Ann Chisholm, who's the Government Relations Officer. She may be in the back office at this point, and I expect will be joined by Springworth, who's an alternate board member representing the district on the WMATA board. So we have the right people from WMATA to be talking with tonight. And I think I want to turn now at Peter for you to do your presentation, which I think will take about 20 minutes, but I think will be very helpful to everybody to understand where we're at in this process. And then we'll turn to questions and answers. So Peter, if you can take it away.
Thank you, Councilman Fruman. Thank you for providing this opportunity for us to talk to residents throughout Ward 3. And really appreciate you and your staff for being very engaged in this process. As you said, my name is Peter Cafiero. I'm the Vice President of Service Planning and Scheduling here at Washington Metro. And Al Himes works for me on my team. Allison and I are co-directors of the Better Bus Network redesign project, which we're talking about today. I am a Ward 3 resident and don't own a car, so I rely heavily on buses as well as Metro Rail. You'll often see me on the L2 and many of the other routes, the 30s, the H's in particular, but pretty much all the routes in Ward 3. So Allison is going to share the screen. I assume that. I'm not seeing the presentation yet, so.
Oh, there we go.
All right, so thanks, Allison. So next slide, please. So a lot of people start by asking, like, why are we redesigning the bus network and why now? And there's a number of key reasons. First, this is not a reason to do it, but it should be noted that we're not alone in doing this. Many cities around the world have been looking at their bus networks for several reasons. One is that very often, the bus network hasn't changed very much since the days of streetcars. Not necessarily a bad thing. A street like Wisconsin Avenue, which had a streetcar, will always need strong bus service. But there are new developments that have happened over the years. There are areas that we're maybe not invested in as much as they should have been that we need to look at. But also our region is growing, continues to grow. Our bus ridership is growing. Post-pandemic, we're really happy that unlike many places around the country and even around the world, our bus ridership on Metro Bus is now higher than it was in 2019. And most of that growth has occurred on routes where we've really invested in the days of service, the span of service, the frequency. For example, our overnight bus network, our frequent bus network throughout the region has really driven that growth. Part of that is related to people's travel patterns changing. To some extent, there were a lot of bus trips that in the past, pre-COVID, were made by what we came to know as essential workers or essential travelers during COVID. They were always there, but not necessarily as visible as they should have been. But I think there's a lot of opportunities post-COVID as more people are working in the neighborhood, traveling to meet up with friends, to go shopping, to go to appointments, to really encourage shifting to transit and using the transit network while also making service better for our customers who really do rely on the bus system. We've taken more of an interest than maybe we did in past generations in prioritizing customer experience. I mentioned before frequency, reliability, customer information on when buses are coming. There's a lot of things that we've put an effort into and will continue as this process moves forward. But finally, we do need to make sure we're being efficient. So these are tax dollars ultimately that finance our operation, and so we want to be efficient. We want to get more riders where we can by providing actually better service to attract more riders and make better use of the resources we currently have. Next. So this process has been going on for at least a year and a half at this point, over a year and a half. We started in the fall of 2022, really with a blank slate, talking to our customers, talking to potential customers over a 5-week period. We met with almost 10,000 people to identify where there were gaps in service, what people's priorities were, what worked well that we don't want to disrupt, what could be better with the bus service. We took all of that as well as a lot of data that I'll go into in another slide. And we developed what we call the draft visionary network that went public a year ago in the spring of 23. Another 9 weeks of outreach and over 20,000 people that we engaged with, and almost over 8,000 comments on that visionary network. We called it visionary because we were really focused on the needs. We didn't want to constrain ourselves specifically to dollar resources. And as you may know, many of our jurisdictions throughout the region also operate their own local bus services. And so we didn't want to spend a lot of time figuring out if we needed a new route, who actually should operate it. We wanted to look at it from a customer's point of view and identify what the needs were. So we developed that visionary network. We estimate it's 30 to 40% more resources than currently are spent on buses in the region. So it is certainly where we want to get to, not something we can do right now, but it pointed us in a direction that we want to be moving into. And it got a lot of comments, both positive, as you would expect if we're adding significant service, but also negative reactions. And I'll talk to some of those later. We have now taken those comments, revised that visionary network, and that is on our website. But right now we're also focused mostly on what we can do this year and next year. And that's what we're calling the 2025 Better Bus Network. This is using our existing resources, but in ways that we think will provide overall better service across the region and attract new riders. The feedback you give today and you've been giving over the last that 8 weeks that we've been receiving comments are really important. I know we have a lot of people tonight that want to talk about Cathedral Avenue and the N2, 4, and 6. I want to hear those comments, but I'll tell you up front, that was the proposal we put out was not correct. And many of the comments we'll hear tonight, in fact, are true, that Cathedral, we didn't intend for it to only have rush hour service. That is what is in the current proposal. I'll explain how we got there so you don't think we're completely crazy, but that's something we really need to hear, where looking across the entire region, we didn't necessarily get everything right. So we want to hear that feedback as we move forward. We're going to take all that input over the next few months, try as best we can to make revisions to address as many of the comments as we can. And this fall, bring to our board our proposal for the final network that we would roll out in 2025, probably in late June of 2025. So also want to stress nothing's changing tomorrow or in September. We still have a lot of work to do, and there will be a lot more that you'll hear about in the fall as we move forward. And then we have a lot of work to change signs and lots of other things that need to happen before it actually changes. Next slide. So the main thing we're trying to do is really build on the success that we've had. I mentioned before our frequent service network, which we introduced in September of 2021, coming out of the COVID pandemic. We really shifted some of our resources from what had been a very commuter office worker-oriented service more to fill in a lot of the frequency and span gaps throughout the region on key routes, middays, evenings, and weekends. And that's where our biggest growth has been over the last few years. And as I said, it's really brought us to overall higher levels than we had pre-pandemic. And continuing to grow. Just as a reminder, pre-pandemic, bus ridership over decades had been declining every year. So now we are higher and continuing to grow. We wanted to emphasize connections to job centers, to transit stations, hospitals, other places people are going. Try to get multiple destinations on a route so that people will be riding in both directions, making use of the capacity that's there being more efficient, but providing better service to our customers at the same time. Trying to be more convenient and direct where we can. We do have the geography, geology, and the street grid that we have in the district and in the greater region. So it's never going to be a clean tic-tac-toe board of routes. But we do have particularly, not so much in Ward 3, there's a little bit, but when you get down to east of the river, there's a lot of routes that end up back almost where they started before, before they get to the end of their route. And we think that there's ways we can straighten that out and actually provide more connections and opportunities to our customers. We are trying to emphasize using the bus lanes and other bus priority that the district and our other regional partners are providing, and continue to work on addressing traffic congestion, which really isn't helpful to any of us, tying up a lot of our resources in traffic, as well as our customers spending their time tied up in traffic. And certainly right now with the NATO conference downtown, we certainly have a lot of those challenges in the district, but we'd like to continue to improve where we can our ability to get buses through. And lastly, this is an opportunity to talk about how we identify the routes and how we make it easier for new riders, potential new riders, to understand the system. I'll talk about that a little more in a few slides. If we do all of this, though, we project we can attract 13,000 more trips daily to our bus network, which is a significant increase from where we are today. And that, presuming those trips are shifting out of automobiles, will actually have a significant impact on greenhouse gases as well. Next. So I mentioned, I think before, that we used a lot of data in this process as well as public input, and people have asked us about what data. So we have this slide now that lists some of it. Clearly we have our own bus and rail ridership data. We have a sense of where our own customers are going. But we also have, and we've compiled since our fiscal year 2019, that was started in 2018, we've produced an annual performance report for every bus in Metro system. It's on our website. That performance is all about not just its reliability performance, it's how many people are on the bus relative to the cost of operating the bus. There's a lot of metrics that we track, so that gives us a sense of which routes are more productive than others. That doesn't necessarily mean if it's less productive that it shouldn't operate, but it gives us a sense of how we're doing. The third bullet relates to Prince George's County, where we're partnering with their local bus service to look at that as well. The fourth bullet on this chart, the data on all regional trips. We didn't want to just look at our own ridership. We wanted to look at people not riding the bus. So we've purchased essentially cell phone tracking data, which I know sounds creepy, but it's anonymized. We don't know who individuals they are, but we know for calendar year 2019, so pre-pandemic, and calendar 22, the most recent post-pandemic that was available when we were doing this planning work, where generally people are going, and whether they're driving, whether they're walking, biking, taking the train or the bus. And the idea being that if we see trips not being made by Metro that we think we can actually serve that market, it's something that we use to guide us to look for new routes, new connections. Of course, we have the comments we got before from the previous rounds, some data on population and some surveys that are available. Used all that to develop this proposal that we're talking about tonight. And two other things. One is we did look at some bus stop consolidation where bus stops are closely spaced to each other, particularly on routes that have very frequent service, where we really do want to speed up the ride for customers on the bus. When a bus pulls into a stop, it actually loses a lot of time pulling out of traffic, merging back into traffic, in addition to the time stopped at the bus stop. we're balancing that, of course, with the need for access, and we certainly understand that as well. So it is a trade-off. We're looking really at stops, particularly in downtown and other places where there are bus stops every block or two, and they're very closely spaced. But that's something we'll have an ongoing dialogue with everyone as well. And then the route names, I think, will be talked about on another slide. Both of those are new to this round. We didn't talk about them in the previous outreach a year ago. Next. Because we're constrained to the existing overall budget, we did have to make some trade-offs. We couldn't do everything that we wanted to do, everything that's in that visionary network. So where we prioritized on consistent service levels across the days of the week and the times of the day. We prioritized improving service first in areas that we call equity focused communities. These are areas with a higher percentage than average of minority, of low income, of disabled populations. And we prioritized where we could make the routes less twisted and indirect, and where we could actually make things move a little faster. The trade-off was in some areas where there was very low ridership, we did make some decisions on reducing or discontinuing service. In some cases where we saw that rush hour ridership really hadn't come back to the levels we anticipated pre-pandemic, but off-peak service needed to be improved, we smoothed the service out across the day. And in some cases, both because of the bus stop consolidation, but also because in some places we took routes that are operating close to each other on two different streets and combine them on one street. An example, not in Ward 3, but one I cite all the time is in Georgetown. We have a bus today on P Street and Q Street that are very close. We've consolidated all of that on Q Street in this proposal. So in some cases, people have to walk a little farther to a bus stop. Next. So I have a few slides that I'll go through neighborhood by neighborhood. I put that in quotes because we were trying to get data. You need to conform to census tracts. Census tracts don't necessarily cleanly conform to what we consider neighborhoods. So you'll see some unusual things here, but just bear with me. So we're calling this Friendship Heights and Palisades. It clearly includes Tunley Town and some other areas as well. But in that area that you see shaded, you see the highlighted on the right side on the map, we increased by 45% the number of people who have access to 20-minute or better service on weekdays, and by a huge amount of people who have access to weekend service, and trying to be at least every 30 minutes on weekends where we can. So that includes the weekend service along Nebraska Avenue, which currently doesn't have very much service during the weekday and none on weekends, as well as some earlier starting times on some routes. And we also have been aware for a number of years now of the new MacArthur High School in Palisades, and reconfiguring one route and adding the second route, or improving access to that high school, particularly from the northern part of Ward 3. Next slide. In what's called here Van Ness and Barnaby Woods, but also including sort of Chevy Chase and some other areas. We have improved connections across the park, going down towards Sibley, so that overlaps with the previous slide, as well as the C85, which is that connection that goes down to MacArthur High School, but also into Georgetown and Foggy Bottom from areas in the north of Ward 3. The C87, and I'll get to the names in a slide or two, but there are a number of routes that are really school-focused routes right now that we have incorporated into more general purpose routes that would actually provide more use to riders overall. One of them is currently the D31, which comes across from Upper 16th Street but it will actually be extended to first be both directions, but extended to Silver Spring on one end and Van Ness UDC on the other to provide some additional cross district and cross state line connections. Next. This one neighborhood name wise drove me a little crazy because when I first came back, it said Cleveland Park and Woodley Park, and I didn't want to look completely dumb here presenting to you, so made sure Glover Park was mentioned. Clearly, it also shows a good chunk of Georgetown. But in this particular area, we do increase the maybe a little less dramatic percentages than the previous slides, but it's a significantly more riders that are connected to jobs, that have access to service and longer hours. And we've been also working to consolidate and streamline services. So for example, on the current H2 and H4, which split, recombine, we've tried to have a consistent service across Porter Street and continuing across through Washington Hospital and out to Brookland. So there's a number of those types of services we've been working on. Next. So the route renaming, which I know a number of people have had questions about. So our current route names date to 4 different predecessor companies that were taken over by Metro over 50 years ago. And some of those date back to decisions made in 1936 about what was a streetcar, what was not a streetcar. That's why you have routes with numbers, routes with letters and numbers. In Virginia, you have routes with numbers and letters. Everybody learns the route by their house. But if you want to go to some other part of the region, or if you're just moving into the area, our surveys have found it's very off-putting to potential riders, and we do want more people to ride our buses more. So we did a lot of market research. We were trying to find what people thought about the current route names and what could make it better. I would also say that this is not something we would ever do lightly. It would be a huge effort, very disruptive to do on its own. But then changing the entire network of service is really a generational opportunity to look at that, because we're going to have to change every bus stop sign anyway and every map we have, and get a lot of customer information to our customers and our own employees about the new routes. It's the one time where we can also introduce route numbering in a way that is comprehensive and emphasizes to riders that the route may be changing. You really need to pay attention because everything about the route is changing. So in market research, we learned that what was most memorable to people was a letter number combination, as opposed to, say, a 3-digit number. People really wanted to have the routes named after major streets, which seemed like a good idea when we had, you know, if you think of DC as a lot of state names, to use the postal abbreviations, but it turns out we don't have most of our streets aren't on a single state name route, and when we try to apply that to the whole network, it really wasn't possible. But we did follow the recommendation from our customers of the letter number, where the letter meant something that described a little bit about the region. So we use the first letter is the initial of the jurisdiction or combinations of jurisdictions, like Alexandria and Arlington sharing an A, and also sharing a very integrated bus network there. In the district, it all really was very fortuitous. We had 2 letters, D and C. We had a lot of bus routes, have a lot of bus routes, so 1 letter would have been very constraining. And actually, one of my staff was genius, I think, in coming up with this idea that we would use D for routes heading downtown and C for routes that are more crosstown oriented, that are going around rather than towards the core. The second character is based on the corridor that the route's operating on. In some parts of the region, it may be a neighborhood. And the third character is the actual route itself. And so in this example, Connecticut Avenue corridor would be the 70s, the D70 being the successor to the L2, the 72 and 74 going up Columbia Road, along what the 42 and 43 do now, and going downtown, whereas the C80s would be the military Nebraska corridor and its various branches. Next. So what we've heard so far from Ward 3, and we certainly have heard a lot from Ward 3, number of comments from the border between Ward 3 and Ward 4 up in Chevy Chase, Barnaby Woods, some of which dates back to some routes that were discontinued a number of years ago that go over to Friendship Heights, but also the second bullet about McKinley Street, we shifted what's the current E4 service, the new C83, to Military Road east of Connecticut Avenue. So that further opens up a gap in service in the Barnaby Woods area. The reason we did that was, and this is just, I think, really more Ward 4, but McKinley Street in Ward 3 is two-directional street with parking on one side of the street, but when you cross over Connecticut, it still is two-directional. We're trying to run two-directional buses, parking on both sides of the street. It's not reliable, and it's really not safe. There may be opportunities to work on street configuration, and we'll certainly look at that with the neighborhood and with the district. But in the current situation, we really couldn't build a frequent, reliable crosstown service on a street that really had those problems. Glover Park, which I'm sure we'll get some questions today. Our proposal has service operating on Tunlaw, which certainly is at the edge of the neighborhood. A lot of that is related to the challenges of operating bus service through the neighborhood. I'll talk about that, I'm sure, when we get to Q&A. As I mentioned before, we're hearing a lot. I'm sure we'll talk tonight a lot about Cathedral Avenue service in just south of AU, basically, as well as the Massachusetts Avenue and all those, the N2, N4, N6 successor routes and their frequency. And we've also heard both pro and positives and negatives about the proposal of having the Connecticut Avenue service, the current L2, remain on Connecticut Avenue down south of Calvert to the Hilton Hotel and then into downtown, and have other services replace it across Calvert and down Columbia Road. But that so that would make that service much faster for people going downtown, but would necessitate a transfer to get into Adams Morgan from Connecticut Avenue. So we've heard both sides on that issue. Next. So we have still some time to put in formal comments. Comments are open until 5 p.m. on next Monday, July 15th. Go to WMATA.com/betterbus. And there's a number of opportunities to learn more about the network, look at maps, take a survey, provide written comments. You can upload comments if you have them all typed up. I would encourage you to share that with your friends, your neighbors, your family, anybody you know that uses or cares about bus service anywhere in the Washington region, Washington D.C. region, because we do want to get and hear from everybody, and we will, as I said, then take all those comments, read through all of them, and take that into account as we finalize the network. Next. So I think I covered this. We will refine the network. We'll share that with our board and with elected officials in the fall, and hopefully get a plan approved that we can begin to implement next summer. Next slide. So there's a couple of slides after that I'll just show you what they are. So the first is, and I assume, Allison, that that we're going to share this presentation because these are just there's embedded links here, which obviously you can't click on, but we have neighborhood profiles and there are relevant maps that are all on that WMATA.com Better Bus site. And then the next two slides, just to show you, the councilman asked that we have a map side-by-side comparison of the current map and the proposal as best we could with the differing formats that we have. Because of the size and shape of Ward 3 to make it legible, we split this into two. So we have sort of Northern Ward 3 and Southern Ward 3. And I'll use those to refer to as we get into the questions. That I'll turn it back to you, Councilman Freeman. Be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. That is super helpful. And let's turn to questions. I wonder for the moment if you could go back to the kind of cheat sheet of the 6 or so issues that have come up in Ward 3 that are become very clear to you. And I'm gonna work my way through those, and if there are folks who have issues that are not on that list, then we'll also be sure to get to that. I had said I think we'll start with the N2, N4, N6 issues, which I know you have some thoughts on already. A number of people signed up saying that they wanted to speak on this issue, and Kevin, I don't know how we will do this. Do you elevate folks up to become panelists when they speak?
Yeah, if we call on them, we can go ahead and unmute those folks and we'll let them speak. So we should be able to do that if you call on them. Otherwise, we can open it up at that time as well.
Okay, so I have a list of people who had indicated a desire to speak about the N2, N4, N6 issues. I looked in the participants and didn't see a number of them. Jackie Blumenthal, you were on that list, but I think I'm going to hold you for Glover Park if that's okay. Kelly Mack, didn't see on the list. Elizabeth Rich, Denise O'Reilly. If you are on the list and want to speak, raise your hand. Jennifer, I didn't see. Scott Anderson, I didn't see, and Mercer Simon all had indicated a desire to talk about these, and I didn't see them. If I missed you, raise your hand, let us know. Dale Brown, Sylvia Garzoli, and David White all were on the participants, and if any of those three would like to speak to the N2, N4, N6 issues, that would be very helpful. So Kevin, can you unmute them one at a time so that they can ask their questions about the N?
Yeah, sure. So folks, if you're interested on this topic and the council member just called your name, please go ahead and raise your hand. And I see 4 hands raised here, so I'm going to go one by one on those. And we're going to start with Michelle Arnold. Michelle, you should be
on mute.
There you are. We can hear you, Michelle.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for this very good presentation, and thank you for our council member Matt Fruman and for the WMATA crew to put together such a great presentation. There are a lot of good things, but my main concern is the lack of easy access to Friendship Heights and the number of transfers I'm going to have to do in order to take the bus to all the doctor's appointments and the appointments we have. I have a car, but I do not like to drive. I like to support public transportation. I love it, actually. My granddaughter calls it RN2, and that's what I'm concerned about. How difficult and how much time it's going to take me to get to Friendship Heights. I could take the N2 or the N4, but the N2 is absolutely the most convenient. So that's my concern.
And Michelle, can you say where you live?
I live at the Westchester on Cathedral Ave, across from Idaho Ave.
Great. And the Westchester as an institution has submitted comments. I'm sure you've seen, Peter. We have as well. So lots of people in that building and some of the other buildings there. Okay.
Michelle, I'm George, I'm Michelle's husband, if I can just chime in. Part of the challenge here is the geography of the area. Because to the west of us, we have Glover Park, so you go down quite a hill. And in the back, to get to Tunwall, you also go down a hill. And many of us are physically challenged, myself being one of them. If it was that distance, but it was all level, it would be less of an issue. But the geography is a challenge.
Okay, thank you very much. I do think that let's have a couple of people offer comments on this, and then Peter, you can react. Kevin, did you have?
Great, yes, I'm just pulling those people up now. Again, folks, if you'll raise your hand, next we're gonna go to David White. David, we should be able to hear you now if you unmute.
Hi,
And
thank you
David,
for,
if you want to put your camera on also, you feel free.
okay, I'm not sure if I can do that, but I
What-
would if I could, but I don't.
You need not, but if folks would like to.
Anyway. Hi, thank you for this opportunity. We really appreciate it. I've been living here in the district for about 36 years and frequently take the bus, or rather a selection of buses and metro lines to get around. I do own a car, but I don't like to use it in the district. I tend to drive when I'm going out far away to Philly or something. But I have drawn up a petition that at least 40 of my neighbors have signed to protest the essentially elimination of the N2, N4, and N6 lines. I live at 3901 Cathedral Avenue in the Marlin condominium, and we are very dependent on the bus lines that come along Cathedral and such to get to Farragut North and to get to Friendship Heights. And it not only affects people who live here, but people who come to work here in our buildings. They take the metro and then they take a bus to get to our neighborhood. So the elimination of those lines is really going to hamper activity both ways. The other point I wanted to make, and that we make in our petition, is that there's a proposed new line, a C85 line, that will go on Idaho and then onto the Cathedral and then turn a corner, I believe, onto 39th, going north on 39th from Cathedral up to Mass Avenue. This is a very narrow street with parking now on both sides. It is a one-way street, and it goes directly past an elementary school, the Annunciation Elementary School. And we are concerned not only because of possible parking loss, but also because there are toddlers and young children coming in and out of that building. And currently, we do not have a bus line there, and it's pretty safe. But if we have a bus line, that will end, and we're very concerned about that.
And thank
We
you.
hope it's changed. Thank you.
And thank you.
Great, let's go to Dale Brown, who had indicated he'd like to speak. Dale, I see your hand up. You should be allowed to unmute now.
Okay, first of all, I am a woman. But anyway, first issue is very simply that I don't know how to undo my video. First issue, very simply, there's less service. If you take the N2 and the N4 and 6, both of which I use, right now I can easily get to one of them. If I miss the N2, I can go to the N4. And when I looked at the two schedules and compared them, the every 20 minutes of your proposed route was different and less than the other one. So it is less service, and I think we need to know that. The second problem is I frankly selected this building. I mean, I worked very hard on where I wanted to move. And I selected this building partially because of the N2, N4, and N6. And I think it's really important that you have some buses on Cathedral Avenue. I use those, the two bus routes, one that's near the Westchester and one that's across from the Westchester on Idaho. And there are a lot of people who have mobility problems and perhaps not serious enough so that they would need metro access, but serious enough that, for example, when one of your buses, I think the D90, which does not go to Friendship Heights, instead it stops in Henleytown, but serious enough that a walk to Massachusetts Avenue will be a major hardship. So those are my concerns. The lack of geographic closeness, the less service, and also the fact it doesn't go to Friendship Heights.
Thank you, Dale. Dale, you said you chose this building. Can you remind me which building that
Yes,
is?
I live in the Westchester, and when I decided where to move, I mean, I studied the bus service very hard, because I wanted to be near buses, and I didn't, at that point, I didn't want to be near Metro. And I guess I should also just add that because of the less frequent service and the way it looks, I am actually considering moving. That those of us who are dependent on the bus, this is actually somewhat devastating.
Okay, so thank you very much. The Westchester so far is well represented, and that's good. But I do, for the benefit of the WMATA folks, and it's not news to them, but while we've heard from a number of people from the Westchester, there are other buildings along the way. We heard from one of the other buildings that I think there on Cathedral Avenue, the Towers has raised a very large complex, has also raised similar kinds of issues to the ones that we're hearing here. As you know, this is a real pain point in the proposal that's on the table. Kevin, are there other folks on this issue? And then we'll turn to let the folks from WMATA respond.
Yeah, next up, Sylvia Garzoli. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, you should be able to unmute now.
Thank you very much. My name is Silvia Garzoli and I live at the Towers. That's 4201 Cathedral Avenue. I think that many of my concerns or problems has been set for the previous people, but basically the elimination of the N2 and 6 line leave us in an island with no way to get to public transportation. Due to the geography, and this is something I can add, I think it's been said, from where I live, I would have to walk 0.5 miles up the hill, and it's been measured is 42 degrees at the maximum slope. So I'm 82 years old, and definitely I cannot do it. And on the other direction will be 0.4 miles. When I bought this apartment, as the previous person spoke, I also was concerned about living so far from the metro, but I said, okay, I can live here because I have the bus stopping at the door. So I think I'm not speaking only by myself. The whole complex and many of the other complexes around our has the same problem. Most of the people, young people or old people, will not have any way to take any bus because of the distance and the geography or geology of the region. So I will request this, please seriously reconsider the elimination of the N2 and 6. We need a bus along Cathedral Avenue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvia, so much. Mike Pasoli, you had indicated you'd like to speak on this subject. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself right now, Mike.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Mike Pasoli. I live in the Marlin along Cathedral Avenue. I am 35 years old, and I just want to point out two things to you guys. One, I'm assuming if you're paying attention, you're getting the trend of. We have a lot of older residents and taxpayers in that neighborhood along Cathedral Avenue and all of those buildings. These people depend on the bus to get to their doctor's appointments. They depend on these buses to get to the grocery store. It is, as you know, if you're paying attention outside, 97 degrees today. Even that short walk up to Massachusetts Avenue is a big deal to some of these people. And I take the bus every day myself. I'm someone who's at an age in my life when I can make it work, even though it's a big inconvenience. But I'm looking at my neighbors and I'm asking you to consider the humanity of my neighbors in making this decision that you are putting you're basically landlocking quite an extensive amount of people who pay taxes in this district to be able to get to the places they need to get. And that is something I will be paying attention to when you make your decision. And second, I need to remind you that there are schools over there. And every morning during the school year, I get on a bus, the N2, with about 20 to 30 young kids who are going to Albans, who are going to those schools over there. So you're also removing that opportunity for those kids to take the bus and putting those families out of business on basically getting their kids to school. So I hope these are two things you're really paying attention to. And I'm basically here for my neighbors more than anyone. But yeah, I'll be paying attention to your decision. And I hope that you take this seriously.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. I think I want to turn to letting Peter respond to this. There may be others, but I want to make sure that we cover all of the different issues. And I do think this is one where some of the key concerns have been articulated pretty forcefully and well. I mean, I will say there's references to a number of different buildings. Peter, if you're familiar with the area, you know just how big those buildings are. This is a lot of people. The other thing about what's happening in this space is it does turn out to be there's naturally occurring retirement communities, and it's not all older people, but there are a large number of older people like myself who rely on public transit, and so it's very, very important to them. The linkage to Friendship Heights, you listed in the things that you're trying to do is make sure you have connections to hospitals and things like that. Friendship Heights is a medical center, and so that linkage is really important to this community. That's a place where many, many people go for their doctor's appointments. So you've heard it before tonight. Let me give you a chance to respond and just underscore that this is one of those issues that you'll for sure be hearing more from us on as a pain point that needs to be addressed. But with that, let me turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. And as I mentioned before, I mean, I think there's a lot of what I just heard is absolutely true. But it's good to hear it personalized and exactly where everybody's trying to get to. So what we were trying to address here is the current N2, N4, and then the N6, which is trying to do both routes in sort of looping back on itself on evenings and weekends. The challenge is you have this it's not quite a rectangle, but basically it's a piece of land that has Massachusetts on one side, New Mexico on the other, Cathedral on the bottom, and Nebraska on the top. Each of those segments has some high density housing that warrants bus service. And so that's how we ended in the situation we currently have, where the N6 tries to hit everything. But at the cost of frequency that we could be providing and options of places to go, as well as confusion and long travel times on the weekends and evenings. So we were trying to get basically split that into two routes, one along Massachusetts and the other along New Mexico into Glover Park. That was actually trying to address some other concerns we heard in the prior round of comments about restoring Glover Park connection back to DuPont Circle. But we were trying to serve both sides of the corridor with full-time service. I should point out the same frequencies as those are today are actually even better frequencies. I'll take responsibility, but we kind of lost track of Cathedral. We should not have. There's clearly a lot of apartments down there. We had a route there that you pointed out is currently proposed. In the visionary network, it's proposed as a full-time route, but in the network we're proposing right now, it's a rush hour only, and it's clearly not what should be along Cathedral. We are looking at how we can repackage all this. It's helpful, particularly to hear the desire along Cathedral to get up to Friendship Heights. So that's something we will also take into account. And I've also heard at some of our public meetings, but also here tonight, about the street with the school on 39th Street. So we are looking at all of that. I will say I was personally over there on this weekend at the eyeglass store in New Mexico, and I went down to look at this block myself. As well as I will also say that there's senior staff here at Metro that rides the N4. So we hear it from all different directions. We are looking at it. As I said, in terms of frequency, the proposal is basically this for each of the N2 and N4 replacements. Currently they're every 20 minutes. That would, in rush hours, that would stay the same. On weekends, they're currently, the N6 is every 35 minutes, which is really not a very easy to remember frequency. We are improving that to 30 minutes on each of these branches. So it's a slight improvement. We do want to over time get more service, but it's not intended to be a reduction in frequency. So we are looking at this. I don't have I can't present you a complete proposal, but we do know we need to do something here to address the comments we've heard tonight.
All right, well, thank you very much for that. I'm going to pivot us over to Glover Park, if that's okay. You referenced it, Peter, in your comments about the recognition that Ton Law doesn't take you into the neighborhood in the same way, and some of the issues that have been raised there. I believe that the chair of that ANC, Jackie Blumenthal, is here. Jackie had wanted to speak to the N2 and 2 issues in Glover Park, and so I guess I'd invite Jackie, if we can elevate Jackie. And Jackie, if you want to touch on the N2, N4, N6 issues, but and then carry us into the conversation about Glover Park, that would be really helpful.
Oh, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for doing this, Matt, and the Better Bus team. I am taking this moment to just say that the process is great because we can interact. Here in Glover Park, we feel that by restoring our access to DuPont from the last iteration, we've also been heard after we speak. But I hope that you'll listen to everybody who's spoken about the N lines and what I'm going to say about the loss of the D2 bus stops in interior Glover Park, with the same possible consequence that you might change your mind. For the same reason that people on Cathedral are bemoaning the loss of their bus stops, because they're on a hill, because it's hard to get anywhere else, because they live in a very dense area that they've chosen to live in because it has bus service. It's the same problem in interior Glover Park. People live down in the woods. They have to climb a hill to get up to Ton Law, and they're used to having the bus run in the neighborhood. The bus stops are there. Right now, the bus works for the people in Glover Park great. When you run the C85 and the D96 on New Mexico, Ton Law, and 37th, places that have not had a bus stop since, don't have bus stops right now. Mm-hmm. The people inside Glover Park who are elderly and fairly elderly, and a lot of people who don't have cars can't make it out to Ton Law. It's like a half a mile to 3/4 of a mile up a hill. So we are really hoping that you keep the stops inside Glover Park the way they are now. And one reason is that 2 buses on New Mexico, Ton Law, and 37th it's going to be really crowded since we just added bike lanes to New Mexico and Tunlaw, which means that the buses will have to accommodate the bike lanes in order to stop on the bike lane side, and we'll have to stop in traffic on the outbound side, which doesn't have bike lanes. And right at the moment, there are no bus stops between Cathedral and New Mexico and where 37th meets Tunlaw. So that's a long stretch of adding bus stops over bike lanes, which could be alleviated for at least one of the buses, the D96 if possible, by going back in through Glover Park to the stops that already exist that are in Glover Park. And that would take some of the traffic off of New Mexico and Tunlaw, where it's going to be very crowded and cause huge problems. We lost a lot of parking. People, that area is the densest part of Ward 3, the Glover Park area, because of the apartment buildings we have there. And a lot of them don't have parking, so they park on the street. And we've lost maybe 100 spots for the bike lanes, which was a reasonable trade-off. But we don't have much room anymore. And people are bombarding us at the ANC about this. And I'm sure that you've heard it as well, or it's in their pipeline. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I do hope that you'll read all the comments. I'd love to have you come out to Glover Park and see what happens on Cathedral and see what happens inside Glover Park with the hills and the climbing and the distance, and how people are just going to be dissuaded from taking the bus because they can't get to it. And I'm not even commenting on the frequency part, because everything is problematic at this point from my point of view. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jackie. I mean, we have heard a ton on this issue as well. I'm sure you have, Peter, that
respond,
so,
or there are other.
Say it again.
Would you like me to respond, or?
No, I think there may be a couple of other hands up on this. I just was underscoring, and the comment about some of the density is actually often the density is right next to the major roads, but that isn't true in Glover Park in the same way. You have a lot of apartment buildings that are deep into the neighborhood, close to where the woods are, and so where going to where the people are, and the bus riders. The current system, I think, is doing that. The proposal less so. But Kevin, did we have others with comments on this?
Yeah, we do. And first, I'd like to give Elizabeth Miles a chance. You had signed up in advance. So Elizabeth, you should be able to unmute now if you'd like to talk. All right, I'm not hearing Elizabeth, and I know she didn't necessarily have her hand up. So
She's
you
guys.
And
She's
so
on
let's.
mute.
Well, she has the ability to unmute, Elizabeth. I'll give you a couple more
There we go.
seconds here.
Thank
There
you.
you go. We can hear you,
Thank you
Elizabeth.
very much. I really appreciate what you're doing and allowing us to speak to this issue. And Jackie Blumenthal said a lot of the things that I'm concerned about. I'm speaking particularly for Glover Park Village. If you're not used to the village movement, we're one of 13 villages in the district. And in Glover Park, our constituents are the ones who are striving to live independently in our community as they age. They've been able to afford to stay here. It's a relatively affordable neighborhood. And the bus service has been crucial to those people. The loss of the D2 route back through our neighborhood may look good on paper that being on a straight, more efficient line would carry more people. But I think you have to walk the streets of Glover Park to realize that if your drivers have a hard time getting through the narrow streets and the turns of the Glover Park neighborhood, picture that for those of our residents who are in their 80s who would then have to walk as much as 8 blocks, 10 blocks to get out to Tunlaw, much of it uphill. And it's going to put them in an island, just as the people who were commenting about the N2 buses. They're going to be on an island with no access. We're, as a volunteer group, one of the most frequent requests we get is rides to medical appointments. And that's for people who can't use the bus primarily, but those who can use the bus have been able to get down to Georgetown, to get up to Friendship Heights. I'd say the one good thing about the route along Tunla, New Mexico that's proposed is that there would be access to the medical building up at 3301 New Mexico, where a lot of people have regular appointments. But the downside is that without the D2 bus service in our neighborhood, our volunteer drivers are going to be overwhelmed with requests for transportation to medical appointments. And we don't want to see our volunteer group fail to serve our neighbors, but it's going to be a challenge for the elderly neighbors and for those of us who are trying to help them live in our community. Thanks very much for letting us speak. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And again, folks, we're on the Glover Park issue. If you could raise your hand. Next, I'm going to go to Adriana Radulescu. Excuse me if I mispronounced that, but Adriana, you should be able to unmute now.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to have this dialogue. And I would like to ask if the two maps with Glover Park, the existing and the new, can be put on screen for everybody to see. I will appreciate that. Well, I've been riding this bus for 28 years. When I moved to Glover Park was one of the reasons. All my jobs were along this route. And I made friends in the bus. I saw people getting older, not taking the bus anymore. And I can tell you that there are few patterns that repeat in this bus route. There are people going to groceries, going back and forth to the Safeway or to Trader Joe's. It's a shorter walk and you come down here. There are a lot of children that take the bus to Stoddard and then they take the bus to Hardy. And those kids come from down towards the Glover Park. And there are people going to work or going to medical appointments downtown. For the Friendship Heights, we can take the 30s. So in the past 10 years, this neighborhood has been on the chopping block with various reasons. We had several buses running here. We had the D1 and the D2. D1 just disappeared without any public hearings, without any comments from the neighborhood. It just went away during the pandemic. And now, if you look at the map, you're leaving us with nothing inside Glover Park. And in the past, we had the buses that were cut on Wisconsin Avenue. The reason that the WMATA presented then was that there were long crosstown buses and they were inefficient and it's more efficient to transfer and blah, blah, blah. Now you're giving us a shorter route, a 20 minutes route to DuPont Circle, and you're making it a 90 minutes route to Bethesda Center. You know, if I want to go to Bethesda Center, I will take the metro, not the bus that will take me forever to get there. In any case, I think I would really appreciate if you reconsider this, and I feel personally attacked about all these things. It's tiring to be fighting the same cause and to hear absurd reasons. Now you're telling us that operators cannot run the bus in Glover Park. We had bigger buses, we had smaller buses. These buses have been running for at least 28 years that I know of. Why can't they run anymore now? So please, please think seriously about this because you're doing us a tremendous disservice. It's a shame, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana.
All right, next up, I see Chuck Elkins. Your hand is raised. I'm going to allow you to unmute now. Chuck, you should be able to unmute and speak.
Thank you. I would like to give you another reason why you should restore the D2 or to make some other changes. One is that at the present time, the N2 is at 20 minutes headway during rush hour, and the D2 is at 10 minutes. So what you've done is substituted the D96, which is going to have 20-minute headway. So you basically are trying to crowd a lot more people onto one bus. There are a couple of solutions here. One is to restore the D2. The other one, if you just can't do that, you can try to deal with the Cathedral Avenue problem at the same time. That is, you have the D96 coming down New Mexico. It turns on Cathedral, goes past all these condos and apartments we've been talking about earlier, turns on 39th Street. Now here we're talking about turning right on 39th Street, not on the one, not to the left, which people were telling you not to do. Turn right on 39th Street, go down Watson Street, in back up on Tunlaw, and then head down 42nd Street into Glover Park. I've talked so fast, I'm sure you don't see that on the map, but 39th Street down to Tunlaw again, and then to 42nd Street into Glover Park. I think that would solve a lot of the problems that we've talked about here. Thank you.
So Chuck, thank you very much for that. I don't know if there's more on this Glover Park issue. I think the key points probably have been raised. Chuck, just for the sake of efficiency, given that you're on, Chuck serves on ANC 3D, which is in the Palisades and Foxhall area. They've done a lot of work on this subject. I think they did a survey with maybe 950 respondents. Chuck, I want to give you the floor just to take a minute or two if there are other critical things that you had wanted to raise based on the research that you guys have done through your ANC before we turn it back to Peter to respond on these Glover Park issues.
Sure, thank you very much. There are 2 points. I'll try to be very quick. The first one is you have a map in WMATA that shows where the high frequency buses are all over the district. And it's remarkable that there are lots of red lines all over the district until you get to Wisconsin Avenue. And then from Wisconsin Avenue all the way to the Potomac, which happens to be our ANC. So of course we notice this. And a number of our colleague ANCs, there are no high frequency buses. And so for some reason, you've decided that we can't have high frequency buses. I think it may be because you think we don't have enough riders. Well, one of the reasons you don't have enough riders is because they don't come frequent enough. So it's a chicken and egg thing. The second issue that was raised by so many of the people, our 950 people who responded on our survey, and by the way, we're making that survey available, all the answers available to you, is the unreliability of these buses, particularly the D6, which is the one that runs along MacArthur Boulevard in the Palisades. And basically people were saying, I can't depend on the bus to get down to get downtown or someplace at a certain time, get to the doctor's appointment, because it's unreliable. And so what I'm hoping is that WMATA has information about why these buses are unreliable, and that as you design the new system, that you can fix those problems. And so if you give us more reliability and more frequency, I think we can pretty well guarantee you're going to have a lot more riders, because that's the problem in our area. And I think by not giving this high frequency, you're looking in the past as opposed to looking in the future, where we want to ride the bus, where we'd have no metro anywhere nearby. So thank you for that time. And we'll send you lots of comments.
All right, thank you, Chuck, and thanks for the great work that you do, and to ANC, to Jackie and her ANC for the work they do. 2 last things before we turn it back to you, Peter, and we do want to keep this moving and get to other subjects, but I think there's one other person, Michaela, who might have had her hand up, but also Ann Ladnoff is on. I don't know, Ann, if you wanted to speak. Ann is an ANC commissioner in Glover Park who spent a lot of time thinking about these issues, also hearing from constituents. And if there was something that you wanted to offer, I want to give you the opportunity, and then I think there's one last person with their hand up on this topic.
And if you can hear us, you should be able to unmute now. Again, one more. There you go, and we can hear you now.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Fruman and everyone from WMATA and all of the speakers so far. We really, really appreciate the public's comments and please keep them coming. My ANC runs from near Tunlaw and the D2 N2 combination, and then across Cathedral up to Mass Ave. And I don't want our constituents on Cathedral right there in the middle, 4100 and 4101, to be forgotten, because they are at the deepest part of that steep hill, and they have been writing me, they really need their buses to continue. And that again is a building with a lot of seniors. And they've got bus stops there that are quite close to the building. There is only a sidewalk on one side, so it's not easy for them to get up to the next bus stop, but it's really important to have that service for workers coming in, for people trying to get anywhere that they need to go. And the connection to Friendship Heights is also really important. So thank you for going over that. The interior Glover Park, as Jackie said, it's such an important service. And we hear from all over the city that people are living on hills. We have ridges at the edge of the city on all sides, from Ward 8 to Ward 3. And it is just so difficult for people to walk what looks like a short distance on a map. If you look at the trip planner that is provided by WMATA on the Better Bus website, they would suggest that our people from down there near Glover Park walk a considerable distance, sometimes across national park land, to get to the next arterial street. It's not something that I would ever suggest for one of our seniors, children, people with strollers, people with market baskets. Just isn't possible to take some of those routes. So I really hope you look at this really seriously, your market assessment. If you look at that, all of the maps highlight that little area from Cathedral Heights down to Glover Park as high density, highest propensity of transit, high proportion of disability, and it is not a high income area. In fact, it has the lowest median household income in Ward 3. So think of it as an equity issue for us. We are trying to keep our population, build the affordable housing, be attractive to residents across the scale, and we cannot get people into the buses if the buses aren't there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I guess Michaela, and then we'll turn to Peter, give you a chance to respond.
Hi, this is Megan. I think Michaela Pletzer actually registered me, so thank you, Michaela, but I'll take her place. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Cafiero, for your presentation. I'm really concerned about the bus desert that has been created in Chevy Chase and Hawthorne and Barnaby Woods. Many of the same things that other people are saying about Glover Park, about aging in place, about public school children having access to their schools, about assisted living facilities, people who work there having bus service. All of these things exist in this bus desert that was created with the cancellation of the E6. Similar to the D2, there was no public hearing before this was canceled. During the pandemic, signs went up that it was suspended, and then all of a sudden it was gone. I would have weighed in on this much earlier, but I couldn't ride the bus, so I didn't know about it, right? No, there was no like communication with us to tell us that we needed to weigh in on this. My mother is in her 80s, and she just retired from her job at the Smithsonian, and she took the bus down there for 40 years. She can't, where we live is 2 miles from the metro station. Without the E6, my mom cannot walk 2 miles in order to get to a metro station. I mean, the cancellation of the E6 has impacted a lot of people. And I'll just say, I don't want to take more time than I'm allowed, but the E4, the M4, the L2, they're all in that neighborhood. But reduction of service, as other people have said, leads to people riding the buses less. And that's exactly what happened with the E6. They started cutting it back. Fewer people started riding it. And just one more comment is that for I think about 2 or 3 years in a row, when they told us they were going to cut the E6, we told people to come out and voice their opinion, and they did, and we saved the E6. And then during the pandemic, it just was taken away. So I think that's an area of improvement for WMATA. If you really want to get ridership and you really want to be informed about what your riders need, it feels disingenuous to talk about equity when and talk about people who really need bus service. There are people in Chevy Chase and Hawthorne and Barnaby Woods who don't have it now. They cannot get to public transportation. I'm one of them because I work in Rockville, and I would take the E6 over to the metro station and go north. I'm not going to Tenleytown. That's the opposite direction. So the M4 does not serve my needs. And I've been to about 5 of these meetings, and I hear a lot of talk about a lot of marketing talk about rider experience and more frequent service. And frankly, that's not my experience at all. When you reduce service, ridership goes down. So I really hope you will listen to the comments that people are sending in about the E4, about the L2, about the M4, and reconsider the E6 as well. It really is a lifeline for people in this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan. And so for now, actually, I want to close out on Glover Park. We'll segue, Megan, over to these issues. And I saw James Nash had his hand up, and I think we'll turn to him after because he may want to speak to issues that are like the ones that you just raised. But just to we had a series of comments about Glover Park, and Peter, I wonder if you can react on those, and then Megan, we're going to come back to your issue with some comments from others as well.
Okay, so many of the speakers on Glover Park talked to some of the reasoning. We were clearly, if you look at a map, Tunlaw is very close to Wisconsin, where we do have good frequent service on the 30s. So why did we go there? It's clearly a faster street to operate on. But the most important reason that we proposed over there, as opposed to, you're right, with the hill, with the distance, there's a lot of good reasons to keep it within the neighborhood. But the streets in Glover Park are really narrow. Some of the turns are very tight. There's parking on both sides of the street. And we currently use the shorter buses on that route and some other routes around the city. Those shorter buses are no longer manufactured. They are about to be replaced within the next year or two. They're next on our list to replace. They're beyond their approaching or beyond their useful life. And to get a bus that actually has capacity and durability, we're really being forced into the full-size buses, which we believe, with the way parking currently is in Glover Park, we would not be able to get those buses through. There are probably, I think my staff and I feel that there are some changes that could be made that might allow us to continue to provide service through Glover Park. That unfortunately, to one of the commenters, will probably require some parking removal in certain key, turns and areas like that. Maybe require some streets to be made one way instead of two way. We would like to, over the next, as we get these comments in and go out in the next month or two and look at options, you may see a full-size bus driving through the neighborhood, trying to test some options. We will work with, not in service bus, but just for us to take a bus out and test some things. We will work with DDOT, and we will certainly work with the ANC and the councilman to see if there are things that we can do here to maintain the service reliably through the heart of the neighborhood, which I think a number of speakers spoke very eloquently about the reasons to do that. I'll very quickly touch on, I think, the 3 issues that Mr. Ellis raised. One is the frequency, which I think some others raised as well. That is, that is correct for Glover Park, that there's a 10-minute frequency now, and while there are 2 routes that combined will be 10 minutes, they're going to different places, so I don't think that's exactly equivalent. So that's something that we need to look at as we refine this. I appreciate, Mr. Ellis, your suggestion on 39th Street. I don't think that was on our list of options, but we will look at that. The D6 is one of our more unreliable routes. I know that's outside of Glover Park now, but the D6 and the current 96 are two of our longest routes. An earlier speaker spoke about the old 30 zone Wisconsin, which used to have that honor of going clear across the district and having a lot of reliability challenges. Really, the 96 and the D6 are our two remaining really problematic routes because they go through all the most congested part of downtown, go all the way over to the far eastern side of the district at the Maryland state line. And so our proposal in both cases splits those into two routes. Based on comments that we heard a year ago, we have a greater overlap so that you can get from, for example, Palisades into downtown and not have to transfer somewhere. But we're hopeful that that will improve reliability, and if that can then lead to increased ridership, we hope, and I think in the visionary plan, we do want to increase frequency on these routes beyond what we currently are able to do. So I think I touched all of those, Councilman.
So, yeah, very, very helpful. I do think, I mean, it is interesting how technology impacts, and technology, you had a way to be more nimble with smaller buses, and you may lose that because of technology, and then you have the challenges of geometry. I hear you on all of that. I do hope that you will take to heart Jackie Blumenthal's suggestion that meeting with them, if you're going to go into the neighborhood and look around and try to think about possibilities, folks like Jackie, folks like Ann, incredibly knowledgeable, and they would be the people you would be coming to if you're thinking about, oh, could we eliminate some parking in order for you to have the turning radiuses that you need. So I would very much encourage you to engage directly with them on these issues. The bus size thing raises a thing that's not really on the table tonight, but microtransit. We all should be looking at whether or not there are ways to get at the interiors of different neighborhoods, like the issues raised around the E6 and internal in Glover Park, using small buses to get to larger routes. That's an idea that we should have out on the table. That's not going to be a part of this plan, but I do think it can be part of a long-term solution. I want to turn, there was the conversation about Chevy Chase DC. James Nash is on, had his hand raised at around that time. James, if you want to come on and offer your comments on whatever topics were on your mind, that would be great.
Thank you, Council Member Fruman. Can you all hear me?
We can. If you want to put your camera on, that'd be great, but you don't need to.
Oh yeah. Where is? I don't see the camera.
It's okay.
Sorry about that. It's not evident to me. Okay, so I'll just talk. I want to second to what Council Member Fruman said about the smaller buses that would provide neighborhood service. That might be a solution to the E6. And I also want to second what Megan said. She's part of our ANC 3-4G Transportation Committee, and everything she says I wholeheartedly agree with. So because we're 3-4G, I've had the chance to sit in on 2 town hall meetings, 3 and 4, and I'm going to take just half a step back here and tell you it's interesting that I'm hearing the same kinds of problems in both town halls. A lot of it has to do with seniors who are cut off from medical services, and we have that problem with Friendship Heights. But I'm hearing that from Ward 3. So this is a a big problem for you. It's now in 2 wards. Second point I want to make is you're cutting out our weekend service, and if you look at a map, which one of our people on the Transportation Committee has done, if you look at a map on the weekends, our entire ANC is basically without bus service anywhere, except maybe at the boundaries. A total bus desert on the weekends. And I have a little advice for WMATA. The next time you're going to cut our service, please don't call it Better Bus. There's enough cynicism in our area as it is. And people here are not stupid. And when you call Better Bus what you're doing, it adds insult to injury, and it really doesn't help. Finally, there is a question at the end of this mini tirade. Thank you for bearing with me. And my question is this. You always say when you cut our service, and you've been cutting it for years, that the reason is ridership. Okay. There is a crude materialism there that is a corporate idea. And I want to put to you that buses serve the common good, and you cannot measure the common good with numbers, okay? And so I want to reject the whole framework that you're using, that you somehow think because it's data driven, well, then that's great. And we're fine with that. The common good is served when seniors age in place, and it's going to cost us more money when they can't. And that's what you're doing to seniors here, and as I've heard in Ward 3, farther west. The common good is served when we get to go to the other part of town on the E4, which you are cutting frequency of and eliminating completely on the weekends. The common good is served when we undo some of the racial segregation that housing has. Buses do that. The common good is served when people ride buses together and talk. We're a lonely, isolated society. So when you look at ridership alone, you're missing all of that. And my final question to you is, you say when you make your cut decisions, you look at ridership, equity, and other factors. Please define for me your definition of equity and your definition of these other factors so that we can get some kind of accountability on how and why you cut our service. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, James. I think there's a couple more hands up. Am I right?
Yes,
Kevin?
I see 3 hands to speak to these issues. I'm gonna go ahead and allow Cal to talk. Cal, you should be able to unmute.
Yeah, and I want to be able to share my screen. So can you make that happen?
Yeah, Cal, unfortunately, attendees cannot share their screens, and I think we messaged you in the chat. If you could submit your maps digitally, we can make sure that we get those captured in the feedback. Sorry about that. For now, we'll
No,
just have to use these maps.
I also wanted the public to see it. Well, I'll try to use these maps that are up there on the screen. So let me make a couple comments. First of all, I don't buy it like Jim Nash. I reject another notion that you can't have shorter buses. Please talk to AC Transit in California. Please talk to other bus operators that have different size buses. They're still running 30-foot buses on some of these routes. That doesn't make sense to me at all. That you have to find a solution to be able to run on smaller streets. Secondly, the slides and the early presentation only mentioned Barnaby Woods for this part of town, but the whole neighborhood is Chevy Chase, and part of it's on one side of the district line and part of it is on the other. So if you look at this map on the right, well, actually, look at the map on the left. If you follow the red line along McKinley Street, there used to be a line that picked up from Broad Branch Road and then went over Western Avenue. That was the E6. So you saw a fairly nice network of things crisscrossing. If you look at the map on the right, you see literally one route that goes through the heart of, and it's mostly in Barnaby Woods and Hawthorne, which they need to service, but the heart of Chevy Chase is actually in between those places, like along Lafayette School and McKinley Street and so forth. So you've created a bit of a, and this is fairly dense single family housing. It's not like, we're not the lowest density neighborhood in the city. But if you were to look at weekends, this C85 line that you have snaking around here disappears completely, as well as the service of Friendship Heights. So what Jim is talking about is there's no service if you trace from Connecticut Avenue to the Circle down to Nebraska, then up to Military, then to the park, and then that's it. There's no bus service north or or east in the north or east sections of, or the central sections of Chevy Chase. So I just want to mention that. I don't want to have people forget that a lot of us do live very near the border of DC and Maryland, and we do travel into to Maryland, and we definitely need bus service along Connecticut Avenue north of the Circle. I also question whether the M22 that you have planned in Bethesda is actually going to be something you can run on time. I'm glad to hear Councilmember Fruman suggest that y'all come in and come into the neighborhood. We'll be happy to meet you. We'll give you a tour. We'll gather a small group of people together. It's what we've been wanting for 2 or 3 months now. So if we can get that to happen, that would be super.
All right, thank you very much. There was another hand up, I believe, Mindel Gaynor. I don't know if that's on this issue, but why don't we hear from Mindel, and then we'll give Peter a chance to respond.
First of all, thank you, Councilman, for pronouncing my name correctly. You're a first in many years to hear that. I'm talking about the transit down Connecticut. It connects to what James and Megan and others have spoken to. Just because we live near the Chevy Chase border doesn't mean we have a car or can easily walk down to Van Ness or Friendship or Nebraska's metro. We have a lot of people who are, I'm going to say, older, like myself, people who are disabled, children, and we have a lot of low-income people who need the bus to get to and from grocery stores. And having gone through the erratic schedule on L2 for about 30 years, it would be great if you could at least return the L1 during rush hour. As well, when they count the riders on the routes, so many times we're just waved on without, tapping our Metro card. And there are so many people who take advantage of being able to ride free anyway. I've been on the L2 at about 10 in the morning, and out of maybe 20 people, 6 have paid. We just need some help up here. We've for decades spoken to the idea of having a shuttle bus, as we're talking about smaller buses. That would be great to and from Van Ness. The E line, by the way, runs at the same time. So you got the 2 and the 4, or the 4 and the 6 within minutes of each other every half hour. And you miss that and you're stuck. I'm tired of having to use a Lyft ride or an Uber ride because the bus hasn't come or it's stuck in traffic. Thank you for doing this job. I really appreciate it. And I wish something would be done. Seeing too many times 2 or 3 L2s at the Chevy Chase Circle turnaround, and they're there idling for quite a while. I was told that they're there in case of emergency. Well, there are people waiting to catch a bus. So I hope that someone will take this into consideration. And may I say how sorry I feel for the people on the M1. I can't imagine it being that bad for you to get around. Thank you and good evening.
Okay, well, and thank you. Peter, I'm going to turn it to you. I see in the chat, Cal said that he had one more question. Can you clarify whether the proposed D70 line will go under DuPont Circle or around it? But I mean, here we've moved off of the Wisconsin Avenue Glover Park into the Chevy Chase issues, which are a combination of Ward 3 and Ward 4 issues. But this is another one of those pain points that I'm sure you're fully aware of, and I wonder if you can take a couple minutes and respond to the things that have been raised.
Yeah, so very quickly to that last question, the D70s would continue to use the underpass as the L2s do through DuPont Circle under this proposal. So I think I mentioned this before, but well, first of all, so the M4 used to end at Utah and Western, and so that basically was extended to cover much of the route of the E6. All that was done, and there was a public hearing on changes system-wide in 2021, coming out of pandemic. Again, like this, we had to make some decisions on we had needs throughout the region, and there are were very underserved areas where people were unable to get to work, and we needed to make sure that those were addressed. So that was where that decision was made. We certainly have heard lots of concerns from this neighborhood, particularly on weekends where the E6 and the M4 do not have weekend service. So much of this neighborhood hasn't had weekend service in decades. As I mentioned before, there is the one change we are proposing here, which again, looking at it from a map doesn't make a lot of sense, is to move off of McKinley, so move further to the edge of the neighborhood down to Military. And the reason we're proposing that is because McKinley really is not a street that we feel we can reliably operate on in its current configuration, both between the parking on either side of the street of what really should be a one-way street, but it's a street with parking and on either side, and a single lane in the middle. Buses or cars have to pull into driveways essentially to allow each other to pass. And there's also the intersection at 30th Place and Military, where we have to make a very difficult unsignalized turn with the buses. So we're certainly open to exploring, again, with DDOT and the councilman's office and others, ways to try to address that. The other thing that we are going to look at is, are there ways that we can strengthen the crosstown route across Military? And we really think Nebraska is a real promising corridor for new ridership, because there's a lot of employers between American University, Sibley Hospital, and a lot of locations along there that are not served right now. And I mentioned some of those statistics before. We think there may be ways to serve that market, but also to provide service, some kind of service from Friendship Heights into the neighborhood. Chevy Chase, Barnaby Woods, Hawthorne, many names. Some point, one of you can walk me through exactly where the boundaries of those are, but you know what I'm talking about. So that whole area, not promising anything, but we're looking at what we can do, and we do have, as mentioned before, people mentioned some things before, and I mentioned in a presentation before, we had to make difficult choices. We want to do, as somebody mentioned, a public good. You know, it would be great if we could get to the point where we were funded to be everything everywhere. But we right now have the resources we have. We are trying to improve that. We are trying to do better with what is there, and that hopefully will build a case to do. If we can make incremental improvements, it'll build a case to get us additional resources. But we did have to make some difficult choices. We are hearing certainly from many people on this call. We will go back and see what we can do. I would never claim we can address every issue that we've heard here today or that we're hearing around the region, but we will do our best to tweak and to adjust and to shift some things in a way to address the major concerns that we're hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Oh, I see there's a series of hands up. We're coming, we've got 12 minutes left. Why don't we let the folks who have their hands up, Marie Hoffman and Phyllis Marcus, and if you can, we want to give others a chance. So if you can keep it relatively short, that would be helpful, but off you go.
Maria, we should be able to hear you now if you go ahead.
I guess you can hear me. I have a question, but mostly it's a comment about the C83, the current M4. I live at Ingleside Rock Creek, right next to Temple Sinai on Military Road and 31st. There are a good number of us who ride the bus to get to Friendship Heights and to get to Military Road, and also to go east to get to the other side of the park. But mainly, I can see right outside my window all the staff and other workers, they're private health aides, who take the bus. I see them 7 o'clock in the morning. I see them changing shifts at 5. I see them changing shifts at 10, and they work on weekends. And I don't understand why this service would suddenly be discontinued over the weekend when the same staff and workers need the bus. We have a number of workers in the dining room, for instance. They are high school kids and early college age kids. They live just on the other side of the park or in Columbia Heights. The way they get to work is using the M4. Please don't stop that over weekends. We have a hard enough time finding healthcare people without doing away with their transportation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marie. Phyllis, Phyllis Marcus, you should be able to unmute. Phyllis, go ahead.
did I unmute?
Yep, Phyllis, we can hear you.
Great. I have a different issue. I'm a senior. I live in Glover Park. I ride the 31 and 33 downtown. It's great. I get there in like 35 minutes. And my bus stop in Calvert, Wisconsin, I think is going to stay the same. What's going to change is, it's my understanding, the new bus, maybe an 82, whatever the combined 33 and 31, will end at Franklin Square. And what that means is that I would have to transfer to a metro to get downtown, which is, one, time consuming and also could be physically demanding for a senior person. Why are you stopping the bus at Franklin Square? And is there any chance that the bus can continue to drive to or go to Federal Triangle or the Archives like it has for many years? And I took the bus I worked at Federal Triangle and took the bus for years and got off there.
Okay, there's one last hand up. Gideon, if you want to go, and then we'll give Peter a chance to react, and then I think we'll need to close this out.
Gideon Coleman, we should be able to hear you now.
Thank you very much. I'm a parent of 2 children in the MacArthur feeder system, and I'm here to advocate on behalf of students zoned for MacArthur. The proposed C85 and D94 routes do an outstanding job of transporting students zoned for Key, Hyde-Addison, Stoddart, and Mann elementary schools to MacArthur. So kudos for meeting their needs. Of concern is that students zoned for Eaton Elementary, the largest feeder to the MacArthur system, are not well served, particularly those living in McLean Gardens as well as between Wisconsin and Connecticut avenues. Students who live east of Wisconsin Avenue would need to take the C55 or C61 buses to Tenleytown to transfer to the C85 to get to MacArthur. A potentially short trip would double or triple in duration. And we're talking about families who chose this neighborhood specifically thinking that they would be zoned for Jackson Reed. So this is a new need entirely for everyone who chose this location for a very different reason. I'd like to offer for your consideration a bus that transports students directly from the Porter Street or Woodley Avenue corridors directly to MacArthur at the beginning and the end of the school day in the other direction. Eliminating the need to transfer in Tenleytown would be really helpful, especially in extreme weather.
Thanks so much, Gideon. And that is all the hands I see up for now.
Okay, Peter, if you want to react. Mindy Reiser raised her hand, and she had a question in the chat about, I think, about behavior issues, which I'm not sure we have the right people here to respond on, but we do want to give you a chance to be heard. So Mindy, if you could elevate Mindy, and Mindy, if you can just in a minute or 90 seconds, and then we'll turn back to Peter.
Mindy, you should be able to unmute now.
Okay. I thought I saw her hand go up, but
Can you
I'm sorry. So
can you hear?
yeah, yes, we can hear you. We could hear you for a second.
Mindy, you're back on mute. If you can click the audio button in your lower left there, you should be able to unmute.
Do you want to be respectful of the WMATA team's time? So we do want, they've been generous with 2 hours. So
yeah, I think we might be having trouble with Mindy's microphone.
No.
Yeah, and now we're starting. So let's be very quick. Sheila and Janelle, let's just, if you could just 60 seconds, because we want to move forward. But Sheila, can you?
Yeah, I have an overall question for this Better Bus. I just don't understand the way the buses communicate. And in other major cities, they make it really simple. And there's like a text number you text to, and then the bus stop number is there, and you just text, and then the bus tells you, when the next bus is coming, when the bus after that is coming. They have it in Chicago, they have it in New York, they have it in other places I've been. I went to one of the meetings, I suggested this, and again, just want to put it out there, for this Better Bus service, because quite honestly, I take the buses everywhere. And my big complaint is the fact that they're just, the systems that we have right now to communicate when the buses are coming are not reliable, especially on the weekends. And so I think that the bus, I think that a different kind of system, something like, like the text system, could be very beneficial for people. As long as they knew when the bus was coming, it would be helpful.
Okay, thank you very much, Sheila. And we'll take, and Peter can react on that. And then last, Janelle Pagets, who's the chair of ANC3C in Cleveland Park and Woodley Park. And so, Janelle, please, and another ANC that has been deeply engaged on these issues and a real trove of knowledge and information. Janelle, I'm going to let you be the last commenter.
Thank you. And thank you again for continuing this engagement. Our ANC, our community has been commenting on this since it's been out and available for comment frequently, and all of the things. I just want to say that I heard a lot today this evening about elderly riders, but I ride the L2 on a regular basis. I'm a 1%er on the WMATA Spotify. And the demographic of the bus in the 14 years that I've been taking the L2 has like changed and diversified, and there's so many folks with strollers on there. And I know our ANC passed a resolution about the strollers, and I know WMATA has been rolling that out slowly. I think that there's so many more people that are taking the bus now, and the better that we can make this, the more engaging we make it for across all demographics. Like, I preach taking the bus to anyone and everyone I can, including, my colleagues and I went on a little field trip, and more than half of the 10 were first time WMATA bus riders. So I appreciate all you do, and I think we can only make this system better by working together and engaging, and you know, I'm excited for what the future holds, and we'll continue to recruit more riders. So
All right, thank you very much. Peter, if you just want to take a minute or two to respond, and then I'm gonna close this out.
All right, I will do as fast as I can. I can go a few minutes beyond 9 if we have to, but I'll try. So Janelle is my my single member representative. So it's great to hear from you and appreciate your comments. There was the text on the weekends. I think we actually or text next bus. I think we still have that, but there's more and more technologies rolling out. That's a whole. We could have a whole workshop on the challenges of getting data correct, but we are certainly, as part of this, working on that, as well as bus stop signs. Hopefully some improvements you'll see on that as a part of this. I know some people mentioned fare evasion, behavioral issues. Clearly those are important as well. Not going to be able to address that tonight, but we are continuing to work on those as an agency. MacArthur from Eaton, all I can say is Observatory Circle. There are some places that are just really hard to get buses through and around. But we'll look at it. The 3133 going downtown. So two things. One is particularly post-pandemic, though I think this trend started earlier. We're seeing less and less ridership going into Federal Triangle area, particularly since federal workers haven't come back to the office. A lot of traffic congestion and a lot of difficult turns, and a good functioning rail system underground. And part of how we've been able to stretch the resources system-wide here with the same resources, but how we are able to do more, is some choices we made in terms of not having all of our bus routes get clogged in traffic downtown if there were frequent good rail alternatives available that we could connect to. That was a choice we made as part of this. And weekend service up in Military Road and 31st Street. I think I just, maybe it's not clear, and I apologize for this. But we actually, again, strengthening that crosstown service to get those workers that you were describing to the synagogue and the retirement community there. We actually have 20-minute service proposed across military and then down Nebraska on weekends. We are going to relook at that on weekdays. I mean, on weekdays we have it, but it splits between Friendship Heights and Sibley, where Nebraska intersects military. So we're still looking at that, but yes, we definitely want to strengthen those crosstown corridors. The current E, the current H, H2 and H4, the current 90, 92 across U Street. Those are key corridors that we're trying to actually improve as part of this. I know not everybody's going to find this is a better situation for them, but that is our goal. We are still trying to work in that direction. And I appreciate Councilman, you setting this up tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to continue the dialogue.
All right, well, we started a couple minutes late. We'll finish a couple minutes late, but I really want to thank the WMATA team for doing this. Peter, you in particular, being out there answering questions for 2 hours can be a challenge, but you were very methodical responding, and thank you for your candor. Thank you for your openness. We touched on a number of the issues that we've heard about. We didn't touch on every single one. We have not forgotten the ones that weren't discussed here. There were things on your list, Peter. There's things on our list. You'll hear more from us about those things. I do, as in some of the other places, the engagement with some of the frontline people as you're making final decisions, the conversation about McKinley and your challenges on McKinley and how do you solve that? That necessarily would involve the ANCs. So trying to use this window to be in contact with the folks who are thinking about that, because you can get into a situation where there's trade-offs, and right now you've gone one way and there's somebody who's unhappy. If you went another way, then there might be somebody who's unhappy. The engagement is really important, and really grateful to you and your team for engaging in this process. We are going to take this all on board. We're going to be sending you a letter with many of the comments that we've heard. And hopefully those will be things that you consider as you're deliberating in the coming months. Also, I hope that deliberation's not too academic, but also involves contact with key people who are on the front lines of these issues, who can bring, as they did tonight, valuable personal hands-on information about how it's all being used in their neighborhood. So thank you for this. It's a step in the process. Let's do get to a better bus network. Let's do get to a visionary network. One of the big picture things is we all really grateful to WMATA for your work and collaboration tonight. We need to be great partners for you and have the district and the region be full supporters to your system so we can really get to where we all want to get. So thank you very much. Thank you to all the people who joined tonight. Thank you to Hannah and Kevin for doing the lion's share of the work to get this set up. And with that, let's call it a night.
Thanks,
everybody.
Keep cool.
You too. Bye-bye.